Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg. It's the 28th day of May 2025 and welcome to our show today. First off, we're going to start out with Liberty Essentials with Bill Mohr, Ralph the IT guy, and Karen the Riveter. And after that, Greg Martini is going to be on again. And we're going to be talking about history, the history of taxes, the history of jurisdiction, how we got here so that we know how to back out of this. This is why we do a lot of work on history and on the unconstitutional acts, pretended law, all this nonsense, so we can figure out how we got here. So intelligently, hopefully, we can go forward and counter this. So, and Karen is now laughing in the background. So, morning, guys. How are you?
Morning.
What's happening?
Oh, let's see. 2 days have passed by this week, and I have almost accomplished nothing so far.
Oh, man. Well, I feel bad for you. I've accomplished a lot. So you got to get on that, Bill.
Yeah, well, some people like to take holidays and not do anything, like it's vacation time or something, and that's really not me. I don't respect many holidays over any other day, and I'd just as soon rather be working on any national so-called proclaimed holiday that we have than I would be to sit at home and do nothing. So
it comes from that comes from a farm background. I can tell you that, because all of us that come from farm backgrounds, every day is kind of the same. You get up, you have to take care of horses, you take care of stuff like that. So, and I don't think you ever grow out of that. I wanted to bring up something because I did my TikTok video this morning on the fact that China has been developing specialized amphibious landing barges referred to as the Shushao, I think that's how you say it, class vessels, which have raised concerns about their potential use in Taiwan in a Taiwan invasion scenario. They've been building at the Guangzhou shipyard in China, and the construction started in 2022. Now, I've got some big questions about this. First of all, this is like the worst spy versus spy game on the planet. Modern warfare has changed incredibly. So I really think that we're going to go more to drone technology and the smaller things. That was really developed by the people running the drugs from Mexico and South America. And they were building these little wooden submarines, and they didn't care how many they launched. They would launch like 100 of them, hoping one got through. They didn't care if the people got killed, none of that sort of thing. So we've learned that less infrastructure or less investment in a lot of these large crafts can be overcome by just a massive amount of small ways to answer their threats. So I'm not really sure what they're going to accomplish on this, but it goes back to my feeling that I really don't believe that China is as big of a threat as what they want to make it out to be. I don't think their population is as large as what they're telling everyone. There's way too many villages in the mountains that have that they're like ghost towns. I'm not talking about the ghost cities they've built. I'm talking about actual towns that have been completely abandoned because there's no people there. And so we've got that problem. We've got the fact that their real estate is worth nothing, which is why they got to commandeer American land, and their currency is gone to nothing too. I mean, part of that started with what happened in Malaysia, and they were trying to do a development there. Malaysia decided this isn't a development, this is an invasion, which I wish people in America that were in office actually got this. We're not complicit in it. They do have it figured out. They're complicit in this, that China taking over our land. It's an invasion. It's not an investment. Well, Malaysia decided to just say, you're done, out of here, and gave the land back to nationals at 5 cents on a dollar. Yeah, which really broke. That's what really started the ball rolling substantially in China. But at any rate, I'm not as worried about it. And I think that everybody needs to stop with this fear-mongering nonsense that's just constantly going on. It's like, oh no, we've got another problem. Of course we have problems. It's the news media, it's the narrative. So anyhow, I digress, but I had to put that in there and say, don't run around like crazy people, like, I don't know, people with Trump derangement syndrome, afraid of nothing. So anyhow, what are we talking about today, guys?
That was kind of the point too. To backtrack a little bit, when the so-called bombing of Pearl Harbor happened by the Japanese, Um, it was said. Now, I'm not going to say that the official narrative that we got from Pearl Harbor was correct in any means, but it was said one of the reasons why the Japanese would not travel any farther inland to attack Americans on their own ground. The Americans themselves were armed, and there would be an American with a gun behind every bush waiting for them. Right? That's kind of the point. We can look at these nations all around the world. We can see how large their land is, how many people they got, and how big their military power is. But when we say that the power rests in the people and the law rests in the people and their duty to uphold it, that is what I'm referring to. The same reason why many nations before them have feared to attack Americans, because they know that we are an armed people. And as much as they have tried to strip that from us, there are still many patriots out there that will retain their arms. And I'm not talking just firearms. I'm talking knives, arms, tanks, whatever military equipment you want to own, including pencils. Pencils are a great weapon, by the way. They are pretty much untrackable, and they allow you to carry them anywhere. Right? Arms are not just firearms. Just to throw that out there. So I wanted to touch on something. Who knows who Joseph Warren is?
I'm going to say good morning to Sean Starry. He's back. He's making comments, by the way. Not to get in. He said not to mention geolocational challenges like mountains, swamps, etc. So anyhow.
Yep. Does anybody know who Joseph Warren is?
Fill us in, Bill.
Maybe by name, but Joseph Warren was one of the helpers in the early foundations of the country. I lost my page here. Hold on. Where'd you go? Okay. He was born in 1741, right? American physician. And he moved around Boston in the early days of the American Revolution. He knew such like Paul Revere and William Dawes, John Hancock, Samuel Adams. He was right around with those guys at the time. Right before his death, he died in 1775, June of 1775. Warren was commissioned into the Continental Army, right? And he was commissioned at the rank of Major General. A couple days, I'm sorry, he did not die in June of 75. I don't know where I got that from. But after he arrived in Charlestown after being commissioned, he made his way to where the Patriot militiamen were forming. And upon meeting General Israel Putnam, Warren asked where he thought the heaviest fighting would be. Think about that. You go to battle and you go up to your general and you say, where is the most action? Where are the men dying the most? That's where I want to go. Putnam responded by pointing to Breed's Hill. Warren subsequently volunteered to join the militia at the rank of private against the wishes of Putnam and Colonel William Prescott. Think about this. He is a commissioned general in the Continental Army, and he joined up the militia willing to serve as a private. How many military men do we know that would willingly do that for their country? I don't know of any right off the top of my head. But both of them, both General Putnam and Colonel Prescott, unsuccessfully requested that he serve as their commander instead. Warren declined their request due to the fact that Putnam and Prescott held more military experience. During the early stages of that battle, Warren repeatedly stated that these fellows say we won't fight. He says, by heaven, I hope I shall die up to my knees in blood. Defending the Patriot redoubt against two failed attacks by British troops, he kept firing his gun until running out of ammunition and was killed in action during the third and final assault by British gunfire. This guy, I tell you what, the more I read about him, the more I respect that man, right? Holding such a high rank, being respected by all those around him in that manner, and going into the war looking for the heaviest gunfire possible that he could serve his country and protect his fellow countrymen. It's absolutely incredible. But in 1772, I think it was, let me flip my page here. 1772, 2 years after the day of the Boston Massacre, Joseph Warren delivered an eloquent speech designed to arouse bitter feelings against the British troops and against Britain. He was speaking in Boston at the time, and this is about the last half of his recorded speech. The first half is more directed towards the Boston Massacre. But the last half, he starts here. He says, the infatuation which has seemed for a number of years to prevail in the British councils with regard to us is truly astonishing. What can be proposed by the repeated attacks made upon our freedom? I really cannot surmise, even leaving justice and humanity out of question. I do not know one single advantage which can arise to the British nation from our being enslaved. I know not of any gains which can be wrung from us by oppression, which they may not obtain from us by our own consent in the smooth channel of commerce. We wish the wealth and prosperity of Britain. We contribute largely to both. Does what we contribute lose all its value because it is done voluntarily? The amazing increase of riches to Britain, the great rise of the value of her lands, the flourishing state of her navy are striking proofs of the advantages derived to her from her commerce with the colonies. And it is our earnest desire that she may still continue to enjoy the same emoluments until her streets are paved with American gold. Only let us have the pleasure of calling it our own whilst it is in our own hands. But this, it seems, is too great a favor. We are to be governed by the absolute command of others. Our property is to be taken away without our consent. If we complain, our complaints are treated with contempt. If we assert our rights, that assertion is deemed insolence. If we humbly offer to submit the matter to the impartial decision of reason, the sword is judged the sword is judged the most proper argument to silence our murmurs. But this cannot long be the case. Surely the British nation will not suffer the reputation of their justice and their honor to be thus sported away by capricious ministry. No, they will in short time open their eyes to their true interest. They nourish in their own breasts a noble love of liberty. They hold her dear, and they know that all who have once possessed her charms had rather die than suffer her to be torn from their embraces. They are also sensible that Britain is so deeply interested in the prosperity of the colonies that she must eventually feel every wound given to their freedom. They cannot be ignorant that more dependence may be placed on the affections of a brother than on the forced service of a slave. They must approve your efforts by the preservation of your rights. From a sympathy of soul, they must pray for your success. And I doubt not, but they will, ere long, exert themselves effectually to redress your grievances. Think about this for a minute. Joseph Warren is talking to the colonists in Boston 2 years after the massacre, expressing that it is the desire to still see Britain flourish by American hands. All right? They, even at this time, 1772, they were still redressing their grievances as much as possible. And he understood that eventually he would see, or they would see, the light of day. Now, we know the end outcome of that in our Declaration of Independence. A lot of the things that he's speaking here are the same things that are written there. But he continues on. He says, even in the dissolute reign of King Charles II, when the House of Commons, where'd I go? House of Commons impeached the Earl of Clarendon on high treason, the first article on which they founded their accusation was that he had designed a standing army to be raised and to govern the kingdom thereby. And the 8th article was that he had introduced an arbitrary government into his majesty's plantation. A terrifying example to those who are now forging chains for this country. Does the same still apply today? I ask everybody. Do we have our federal government continuously, and state governments, by the way, continuously designing a standing army to be raised and using it to govern the people? They most certainly do, whether or not you see it. In the States, that's called your National Guard, by the way. That the unconstitutional and de facto standing army that they created, yet they call a militia, which is in no wise anywhere near what the original definition of the militia was. Do they still introduce arbitrary governments into this country? Do congressmen actually write laws according to the Constitution or not?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Every one of those, they are trying to introduce an arbitrary government separate from what the people have designed. So it's still the same today. This is 1772, mind you. It's still the same today. And he laid out that it's a terrifying example to those who are now forging change for this country. Right? The people will eventually grasp onto this concept, I believe. And hopefully we don't have to see what they did in the 1770s, but it may come back down to that because it's the people's right to do so. But he continues on, now addressing his fellow man. He says, "You have, my friends and countrymen, frustrated the designs of your enemies by your unanimity and fortitude." Unanimity and fortitude, sorry. "It was your union and determined spirit which expelled those troops who polluted your streets with innocent blood. You have appointed this anniversary as a standard memorial of the bloody consequences of placing an armed force in a populous city, and of your deliverance from the dangers which then seemed to hang over your heads. And I am confident that you never will betray the least want of spirit when called upon to guard your freedom. None but they who set a just value upon the blessings of liberty are worthy to enjoy her. Your illustrious fathers were her zealous votaries. When the blasting frowns of tyranny drove her from public view, they clasped her in their arms. They cherished her in their generous bosoms. They brought her safe over the rough ocean and fixed her seat in this then dreary wilderness. They nursed her infant age with the most tender care. For her sake, they patiently bore the severest hardships. For her support, they underwent the most rugged toils. In her defense, they boldly entered the most alarming dangers. Neither the ravenous beasts that rage the woods for prey, nor the more furious savages of the wilderness could damp a door. Whilst with one hand they broke the stubborn land, with the other they grasped their weapons, ever ready to protect her from danger. No sacrifice, not even their own blood, was esteemed too rich a libation for her altar. God prospered their valor. They preserved her brilliancy unsullied. They enjoyed her whilst they lived, and dying, they bequeathed the dear inheritance to your care. And as they left you this glorious legacy, they have undoubtedly transmitted to you some portion of their noble spirit to inspire you with virtue, to merit her and courage to preserve her. You surely cannot, with such examples before your eyes as every page of the history of this country affords, suffer your liberties to be ravished from you by lawless force. The voice of your father's blood cries from you from the ground. My sons scorn to be slaves. In vain we met the frowns of tyrants. In vain we crossed the boisterous ocean, found a new world, and prepared it for the happy residence of liberty. In vain we toiled, in vain we fought. We bled in vain. If you, our offspring, want valor to repel the assaults of her invaders, stain not the glory of your worthy ancestors, but like them, resolve never to part with your birthright. Be wise in your deliberations and determined in your exertions for the preservation of your liberties. Follow not the dictates of passions, but enlist yourselves under the sacred banner of reason. Use every method in your power to secure your rights. At least prevent the curses of posterity from being heaped upon your memories. If you, with united zeal and fortitude, oppose the torrent of oppression, if you feel the true fire of patriotism burning in your breast, if you from your souls despise the most gaudy dress that slavery can wear, if you really prefer the lonely cottage whilst blessed with liberty to gilded places surrounded with the ensigns of slavery, you may have the fullest assurance that tyranny with her whole accursed train will hide their hideous heads in confusion, shame, and despair. If you perform your part, you must have the strongest confidence that the same Almighty Being who protected your pious and venerable forefathers, who enabled them to turn a barren wilderness into a fruitful field, who so often made bare his arm for their salvation, will still be mindful of you, their offspring. May this Almighty Being graciously preside in all our councils. May he direct us to such measures as he himself shall approve and be pleased to bless. May we ever be a people favored of God. May our land be a land of liberty, the seat of virtue, the asylum of the oppressed, a name and a praise in the whole earth, until the last shock of time shall bury the empires of the world in one common, undistinguishable ruin. How is that for one of the founding fathers?
That's amazing. I've never heard that before. I love it.
I think I have heard it before, and it strikes me in a couple of different ways right now, based on recent conversations. For one, with regard to China, we were teasing about China a little bit, but they wanted, he says he wants the best for England, and I think that's the same. That's how I've been thinking. I think the rest of the world wants the best for America, and I think we want the best for the rest of the world. When you want peace with everybody and you want everybody else to prosper, and that's, I think, what's happening with China. I think President Xi and President Trump are working together. And I think Trump is causing America to have our own manufacturing increase. We're going to make our own stuff. And China's going to stop exporting everything to all other countries and build up their middle class by starting to make stuff for their own people. That's prosperity for both sides. But you have to play this game of war in order to convince the countries that that's what's best and that's what's going to be happening. And we do want what's best for the Chinese people. We do want what's best for England people. We do want what's best for the French and the Russians and the Ukrainians. We want to get rid of the Nazis and solve all the world's problems, but we have to solve our own first. And the other thing I noticed from this is this very intense sense of patriotism. And reading something like that, as an American, I can go, yeah, we gotta protect our liberties and we gotta protect America. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's going, I think Solomon would be like, vanity of vanities. You know, there is a point at which you have to say, okay, we are just like any other country. This is our team. I get it. But you can move somewhere else and be just as patriotic for that land as you are for this one, and protect your liberties there with just as much enthusiasm. And so there is a point where patriotism can go too far, where you are like, forget all the other countries, we're the best and we have to fight for us first instead of thinking in godly terms.
Well, and I think to your point, this is really important, is that we've got to be careful with some of this too, because bad people will use our emotions no matter which way that we want them to go, and have us follow bad things if they hype it up enough and we stop questioning. So we the only one that's worthy of worship is God Almighty. Everybody else is kind of on approval right now, you know, and with hope that things go in the right direction. But we can never stop questioning. And that goes with question Bill, question Karen, question me, question Greg, question everybody that's out there, because the only one that was perfect was Jesus Christ, and he didn't throw a stone. So the point being is that though I believe that exactly what you said, that we have to solve our own problems, remember, this is how they use division to divide and create wars and conflict. So it has to be met with some wisdom and discernment whenever we listen to stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. And to go back to what you just said there, because oftentimes that's taken horribly out of context. When people mention that that Christ wouldn't even throw a stone, right? Look at the context of what went on there.
Yes.
When I say that I'm for the law, right, no less than the founding fathers were, right? They had their law at the time, and they would be willing to suffer abuses with as much as was within them, up until they realized that there was no turning away from it, right? When the Pharisees brought the woman before Christ, who was an adulterous woman, right? They said, look here, we caught this woman in the very act of adultery. Now Moses' law says that we should stone her, right? And they looked at him and said, what do you say? Right? They quoted the law right there. Christ never once broke the law. He upheld it every step of the way. Okay? So when you look at that, was the woman worthy of death? If she was guilty, yes, absolutely she was. Would she have fallen under judgment right then? Absolutely she was. Why did she not? Because the law that was written, and the same law that they were quoting in part, said that you have to bring the woman and the man. Now, if they caught her in the act, where was the man? The man would have been right there. Why did they not take the man as well? That's up to speculation. I dare bet say that one of them was part of it, or they had set it up, right? That is why there could have been no judgment there, because the law was not upheld in full. Therefore, you cannot throw a stone, right?
Well, it points out the hypocrisy. This is all about the hypocrisy and being a little bit, though we have to, there's a balancing act here in certain things, which requires discernment. It requires knowledge of the situation. It requires knowledge of the law, but it also requires discernment, and also going back to local control over. I mean, we can go in many directions with this local control of the law instead of this collectivism, injustice system we have going on right now. But it's also a moral decision for people to have to come to terms with. But good point. Mm-hmm.
That is why it was said early on by some of our founders and framers that it is better that 1,000 guilty men go free than one innocent man die.
Yeah. I've heard it suggested that there was a bunch of guilty parties in the crowd, because if she was, let's just say, sleeping around, who's the ones doing that with her? Who's going to cast the first stone also reflects, it's kind of like get the mote out of your own eye thing. Well, I can't cast the first stone because I've kind of taken part in the same thing, and I don't want to be the one getting stoned the next time. I'm not saying for me. I'm trying to use a slightly manly voice, but it.
Karen, you're not possible to do a manly voice.
No.
But,
well, and even that can be taken too far, because I've heard many parents when raising up their children. Right? I've heard many parents say, well, I can't tell my children not to do this because I did it. I would be a hypocrite. Well, no, that's not the case. The scripture says when our obedience is fulfilled, we take vengeance on all disobedience, right? When the Lord cleans us up, we remain clean, and we teach others to be clean as well, right? That's that principle.
Yeah, learn from our mistakes. Don't do what we did. Be better than what we did when we were younger. And I think that's you look at the Bible, and a lot of people have a different view of it. It's all the thou shalt not. But do you realize that it's a whole collection of books of people who screwed up? And what's really amazing is that God didn't nuke all of us, humanity. How many times over? I mean, there's the character of God, is saying, it's like a dad. You fall, he picks you up, puts you back on your feet, says, okay, you can do better this time. I got you. Keep trying. But he had the right to eliminate human beings many times over. And he still has stuck with us, which is a really beautiful thing. He's still sticking with us now, which is totally amazing. I'm sorry. I'd probably want to be one of the idiots that would throw a stone just out of, seeing something wrong and wanting it. That's where we come into really having to pray and rely on God for wisdom in certain situations. Because I don't know about you, but my feeling is most of us are so angry with what we've seen going on. But whose fault is it? It's ours. And it's the people that came before us, not in a guilty way, but it's everyone's contributed to this. Everyone's been part of the system. We've used their fiat currency. We've paid their unconstitutional taxes. We've literally agreed to the terms of their conditions and their unlawful contracts, pacts, and whatever it is, their pretended legislation that they put in place. So now it's up to us to say, you know what? We screwed up. Let's fix this and move on, and don't look back once we get it, other than for the value of not doing it again. But you know what I mean? You don't look back at the guilt or the shame or whatever that everybody has participated in some of this. Move along. Let's fix it. But everybody's got to get in the game. And this is a great segue. I'm going to do it right now, guys. Sorry, but I have to. I'd like to invite everyone, as chairman of the U.S. Taxpayers Party, which is the Constitution Party of Michigan. I'd like to invite everybody to join us for our state central committee meeting and our human trafficking conference. We have a couple of speakers there talking about human trafficking, specifically as we're facing it in Michigan, because Michigan is one of the major hubs to make children disappear into, for the reasons of, we've got lots of islands, we have lots of lakes, we've got a direct border to Canada, which is impossible to secure. If we think that we're securing that border by Port Huron and Sarnia and the Sioux and Windsor, I got a lot of news for you. That's the least of our problems. That's just where they can harass people that are trying to pay attention to the law. The lawbreakers, they're on boats, they're doing the Epstein Island thing. They are literally taking kids out on shipping containers. And 94 is one of the main corridors that they take that kids are on. And you see small white vans moving along that area. I got a little clue for you. You might want to ask some questions. Oh, I was going to tell you, yesterday I was on my way back to Michigan. I was in a different state for about a week, and I was coming back. One of the creepiest things I've seen in quite a while. There was a truck from Texas, and there was a great big teddy bear that was like bungeed to the fuel tank on the side, riding right behind the cab. And it was like, I was with a friend and we're like, this is like the creepiest thing I've seen. And I'm like, I don't think we can like pull them over right now, but I'm going to tell you what, we took pictures of it. We took pictures of all the markings and the license plate and such, and guaranteed I'm going to send that up to some of my buddies that are in intelligence, because everything about this was just creepy and wrong. And we've got to start asking questions. Why would there be a semi with I don't know. The whole thing was wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on that many people don't catch in their day-to-day lives, right? We're all so focused on what we're doing and where we got to go, and God forbid we get focused on this little thing right here, right? How many people get tied up on their smartphones?
They're doing it right underneath our noses all the time. One of the things that surprised me, we had a little place down Anna Maria Island that was destroyed by the hurricane, and that's kind of the way it is. But anyhow, I was talking to somebody down there who is, let's just say they're fairly involved in the workings of things. And they shocked me. They said, do you know how many CIA individuals retire to this area. I'm like, nope, totally clueless. I thought this was a great place to go with kids and seemed pretty wholesome. The whole island shuts down at 10 o'clock and such. And the inner workings and some other things that go on behind the scenes, I got filled in on that. And I'm like, nobody carded me for this life. Like somebody should have given me a warning that you need to be carded for what's really going on behind the scenes. And don't be shocked, because when this stuff starts really coming out mainstream, I think everybody's going to be shaken to their core. Even people who think they know everything that's going on. I think there's not going to be one person who's going to get through this without their heart beating missing a couple of beats, having to come to terms with this, because it is so corrupt. And I'm getting ready to launch a bunch of research that I've been doing, tying in Jennifer Granholm and Gretchen Whitmer, not just to the money that they've been laundering through NGOs and energy. I've got a website. I'll tell you maybe next week if I can get some time to actually fill this in with more content. But we're gonna be launching the Brandenburg files, and this is going to be a lot of research and a lot for people to digest and jump into. But we're going to have to come to terms with some of this and point the finger at people and say, prove us wrong, and make people hold them accountable for what they've done.
Well, and that's where the phrase I was going to finish with there from the Roman Empire comes: give them bread and circuses, and they'll never revolt. Right. Well, modern day terms of that is give them bread and circuses, and they'll never pay attention. Right. The other part of that came out of there was the evil was not in the bread and circuses per se, but in the willingness of the people to sell their rights as free men for full bellies and the excitement of the games, which would serve to distract them from the other human hungers which bread and circuses can never appease.
Well, you know what? And something that's really missing is the ability to inspire each other to those things. And this is a switch we're going to have to make in the United States. I've been trying to figure out exactly how to do this, but people have to get away from the material world worship that we have and put our focus on God, who tells us we are approved. We don't have to be somebody. We don't have to accomplish all of these goals that we've set up in our mind to validate our experiences. We don't have to have things. We don't have to have the best things or whatever it is that we're looking for, human approval or competition or something like that. We are, as a child of God, when a parent looks at their children, they are perfect as they are. And I had a huge discussion with one of our kids about that, who was very upset about the people around this person who was managing them and going off on a tirade. These people are completely worthless, was the sentiments that came out of their mouth. And I'm like, well, you can't necessarily judge people on whether they're worthless or not worthless, but what can we do to help them, be better? And I'm like, and I brought up one of their kids. I said, well, on the basis of how you're evaluating everyone out there, your child is worthless because they contribute nothing at this stage of the game. A child does not contribute in productivity to the world, other than the fact that the value they have is that we love them and that they're our future as parents. But they don't provide an income. They don't provide, you know what I mean? You don't look at people as an employer. You look at them in their inherent value that they have just as being a human being. And we all have to stop looking at people that way transactionally. We shouldn't be looking at each other transactionally. We should be looking at each other as your value is because you're alive. And we love you because you're alive. God loves you. Thereby, we love you. When somebody's doing something wrong, we have to hold them accountable. But there's the transactional material world thing. We're going to have to rewire ourselves to get us away from the bread and circuses, to get us away from taking on other people's approval of us, and realizing that the only opinion that matters is God's. And once we get that canonized in our mind, we stop chasing the empty pursuits of life. And our purpose goes on to how do we serve God here and the ones that he loves, that he values. Just because they're alive, they're here, he gave them his breath of life. And then switch it to honor, valor, integrity, those things that really matter and that we should be pursuing every single day to be worthy of trust.
Well, and look at the warning that Christ gave, right? Regarding mainly people in the Christian faith, but those that we would call brothers or sisters in this case. He told them that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Why? Because if you look at your brother and hate him, then you've committed murder in your heart already against him, right? He said, whosoever shall say to his brother, Raka, or you're worthless, is the defining words there. They shall be in danger of the council, right? They're going to stand in front of the council and be judged by that. But whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. So yeah, we have to be careful on how we are judging individuals.
And I want to clarify what I said here, because when I'm saying that a child has no inherent value, I'm talking in a transactional world where people are judged on what they have, what they do, etc. We have to completely eliminate that, because that is the core of Satanism right there. And that's why they sacrifice so many kids. That's why kids are a commodity. They've turned them into a tradable rather than their value as a human being is immeasurable. We are each of us such a treasure and immeasurable, but that's in God's world. And that's what we have to get away from, this transactional material world and step into the world that God intended for us. That is an individual choice. And it's part of the spiritual warfare that we're involved in right now. Did I clarify that up a little bit?
Yeah, I caught it the first time.
I'm glad you did, but I wanted to make sure, because when I know that you're not transactional, and neither am I. None of us here are transactional. I don't make trades with people for what I do. I do it without respect of whether I do it because it's the right thing, not because I expect anything in return, and you guys are the same way. We are not transactional individuals. We do it because we serve God. That's it. Simple.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to go to the concept of child of God, because I researched that. I wrote a Substack on it. I think it's an important concept to keep in mind. When God says we are his children, he's not talking about it in terms of age. That is meaningless to him. It is not meaningless to us, and we struggle with that. Because to him, we are all his children in a spiritual sense. Yes, he is our creator, and therefore we call him Father. And I recognize that. I recognize that he is the Father of Jesus in the sense. But, and that's important relationship to recognize. So I don't want to leave that out. And he wants us to refer to him as Father, and therefore we are children. We are all his children. And he wants us to be with him forever. So that's the children concept. But when you look in the scripture and you look for the words which mean and translate back to children, that's what I see. I don't see a lot of it with young people, little ones. So when Jesus talks about the millstone, they should have a millstone tied around their neck if they interfere with one of these little ones. He's not and thrown into the sea. Everybody talks about the millstone as being punishment for people who harm little ones in the physical sense and small children. But that's not what he's talking about. If you read the context of that scripture, he's talking about if you get in the way of God's children coming to him, which means a spiritual sense, it would be better for a millstone to be tied around your neck. He's not talking about that we should treasure little tiny people and that the punishment for interfering with them physically is this. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about don't interfere with a relationship that God's children of any age have with him. You put a stumbling block in somebody's way, there's a punishment reserved for you. You need to help people get closer to God, not interfere with that. So I think it's unfortunate that the scripture gets taken out of context. But on the other hand, I recognize we have a special place in our hearts that's a maternal, it's a paternal instinct that God has placed in us to protect the most vulnerable of our society. And that gut instinct, that placement on our heart is why when you go to prisons, you'll find that there are people there that have a line they will not cross, and that's kids. And so when somebody goes into a prison who has harmed children, they have a harder time because they've crossed that line. And so these people that kidnap children and use children, abuse children, have no compunction about crossing that line to harm children in a physical sense. They are also having no respect for God's children spiritually. And that's what makes them so much more dangerous to us. They are Satan worshipers in the sense that they are so anti-God. They are trying as hard as they possibly can to get out of his presence, which is the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing. We recognize that. These people who are willing to strive to get out of God and harm God's children in a spiritual sense or a physical sense, they are horrible, sinful people. Now, can they come back out of that? According to the scripture, and I wrote about that in my Substack, yes, they can. Even with that level of sin, they can come back to God and receive forgiveness. And what a blessing that is to us, that our Father has that level of forgiveness.
Well, think about this, how Satan, the greatest hurt that Satan could inflict on God would be to harm his children and those that he loves. And so if Satan's going to go after his kids, because that's going to be one of those things that is, Satan hates God. And when we stand and hold the line for God, and we turn towards him and say, you are our dad. You aren't the one that's here saying, thou shalt not, and have all of our little holy prayers with all the right words and claim it, frame it crap that's going on. It's like actually loving him and realizing his heart is so big for us. He wants us to do well. Think about your kids. Think about someone, if you don't have kids, think about something you love so much. And that's nothing compared to the love that God has for us. And so when we stand for each other and for God, and we get rid of this competition with each other, that's part of the transactional world. When we live in competition with each other, instead of going, I'm not covetous. I don't covet what you have. I'm happy for you. I want you to do well. And stop the competition and work for each other's best good, the things that brings us joy and happiness. Can you imagine the joy that brings God Almighty? That's part of the spiritual shift that we need to go towards is think about when you see your kids fighting, how upset that makes you. You just want them to get along. I'm pretty sure that that's what God wants. He looks at us and he's like, I just want you guys to get along. Help people to have their voice. Help them heal from the hurts that they have. And anyone that's out there doing something wrong, we have to stop them. I'm not saying that we give them a pass. And there's a line that if somebody's just out to hurt other people, they have to be stopped. There has to be justice, and they have to be disabled from furthering this satanic virus, cancer, that has spread across our land. It has to stop. But remember, it takes great discernment to listen to people and realize whether they're just kind of like a bunch of little kids. Like, I kind of feel like God's appointed me to be mom of the world. Okay. It's just like, because, I think that we should all take on that role of being moms and dads to everybody around us in a way. We're brothers and sisters, but we're also can be a mom and a dad to people and look at them and say, a mom and a dad doesn't want anything from their kids. They just love them and want them to do well. But I'm going to tell you what, there's times where you have to lay down the law and say, this is not going to happen, because I'm not going to sit here watch you destroying brothers and sisters around you. Which, to my point, and I'm going to bring this up because Sean brought it up too, about the GOP has been corrupt since then, as well as the Democrat Party. He's got a bunch of comments on X, and thank you, Sean, for saying that. It's that we really have to point the finger at these systems that pit people against each other for the gain of evil people to be in control and further hurt the people that we stand with. And it's all the governments of the world. They've all been corrupt. They've all failed. Israel, I'm going to point that one out. Israel is corrupt. And what is the background of that? I don't have any problems with the Jewish people. Go ahead and sue me for being an anti-Semite. I'm not. I am so against the governments of this world and how they have functioned, including our own, which brings me back to what you said about the patriotism. Who has committed more crimes than any government on the planet? Think this one through, because honestly, the United States of America and the powers that be in our intelligence agency, you cannot tell the difference between Mossad, GCHQ, and the CIA and the CCP. They're all working together. All of them are. And we're kidding ourselves when we say they're not. Because the people in the seats that are sitting in the seats, the pretenders that are sitting in the seats right now, they've all committed treason. The entirety of the legislature of Michigan, every single one of them has committed treason because they have not stood in the way and stopped this. Our communities, our municipalities, they have all committed treason because they're in bed with the zoning people who have been taken over by companies. They're all working with the same group. They're taking their orders from above. And we have to step up, and we have to, all of us need to run for office. Even if President Trump, he's doing a great job. I've got no criticisms. We're not sitting in the seat. This is a big problem. This is not just like, let's remove 3 or 4 people. This is a corporatocracy that we're dealing with here. Who's going to save this? It's going to be all of us who stop sitting there whining and sobbing and going to these coffee and cookie meetings that the GOP, the Democrat Party, all these parties put on, and get in the frickin' fight and decide we're going to run for office.
Yeah, a lot of
Trying not to interrupt you again.
I'm there, guys. I'm just done with it. Right?
I just want to say, and then I will yield to Bill. The dichotomy that I'm talking about is love and hate. That's so much what it boils down to. If you are one of God's children and you want to stay there, and you want to stay in the love of your Heavenly Father, you have to show love to other people. And that goes back to what we were talking about wanting the success of other countries. Well, if you want God to be in charge of those countries, then you want all that is good for them. You don't want to war with them just because they make you angry, or whatever it is. It's just, that's an excuse, but that's sinfulness, and that is hate. So anyone who breeds hate is the opposite of what you're trying to aspire to in life. And these people that hate children so much that they could possibly even fathom hurting them in the ways that they do, that is not godliness. And
it's shocking.
There's sin and there's love and hate. And you can be someone who is trying to do the right thing who loves God, who loves everyone else, and still make mistakes. That's again, the forgiveness of Christ encompasses that. What a blessing it is that you can be trying to do the right thing and still mess up, and you can fall into the traps that are laid in front of us all the time, those stumbling blocks that I talked about earlier. Somebody's trying to trip you up all the time. All these mind games we have going on where you're supposed to hate the Democrats. No, you're not. You're supposed to love the Democrats.
Well, and
stop calling them different than you are, because they're God's children too.
This is a problem, is because if we keep calling the Democrats out, how are they ever going to listen to us? You got a lot of people there that are in there that are political operatives, but guess what? Newsflash, you got them in the Republican Party and the grassroots too. Everything's been infiltrated. Now, back to your point, or to your point, Karen, there's a lot of good people that are trying their hardest in what they think is, and they're choosing lots of ways to try to make a difference. And we need to welcome them in and not say, you're just a worthless this or that or the other thing. How dare any of us do this?
Yeah.
You know, I'm so sick of the Democrats being blamed for everything by the GOP. Guess what? You better look under your own carpet there where the stuff has been swept, because there's more there than I think anybody wants to determine, because it's not the people, it's the structure. And all of these structures is where we have to be doing our analysis. Sean just said, Sean, I love your comments, Sean, and also the real Don Palo. It's like, since 1955 landmark case with removing the Bible from schools and teachings, the ultimate goal was to systematically destroy the family unit, enslave the children. With Trump's, and I love this because I love President Trump. I don't take things at face value, even though we need to go through the process of going, well, this is constitutional, this is not constitutional, this really should stand, or whatever. But there's strategy here. So I want people to think about this. With Trump's big, beautiful bill, the reasons I believe they don't want to pass it into the Senate, as it would weaken the 16th Amendment, which would force a constitutional challenge of the 16th Amendment by installing limits on Congress. Don says, truth right there, Sean. And GOP is just the other side of a coin of corruption. I'm going to put the GOP and the Democrats as wings on an airplane. I'm done with the wings on a bird. It's because we're like maneuver, right? It's wings on an airplane that are fairly fixed, except for the ailerons. Okay, they can move a little bit. However, it's moving that plane in the same direction,
and they're both going to crash.
That's right. They're both involved in the crash of it. And I really think, though, that there's some really big questions we're going to have to ask. And that's, are we willing to stand with people that are different from us, and have the discernment to know whether they're trying their best or if they're actually involved in what's happened. And I'm going to give everybody a warning here. I haven't talked about this because I do a lot of analysis. And when I get ready and I launch the Brandenburg files, it's going to be shocking to people on how much information is there. And I'm also going to be asking people to comment on the information that I've compiled and I'm putting in there, because I need fact checkers also to make sure that what I have compiled, that there's no issues there, because this is the way things are done. We have to help each other with fact checking and such. But there's a kill switch. And I'm going to give everybody a heads up. Our country has never come back, and we've never had a dark start on the energy grid. Now remember, they have taken this country over by the corporatocracy, but the majority of the infractions have come in the transmission lines. Okay, that's what they're trying to get a hold of in the electoral grid as well as the oil and gas grid. I understand. I work in these areas, and I can probably talk about a lot of things with a great deal of information, more than anybody wants to know. Okay, but what I can also tell you, because of knowledge of the clean energy, green energy nonsense that's out there, is that we got a real problem with the solar energy that they put up. And this is part of their taking land over, which is a big issue. There's a kill switch that they've built into these energy, these green energy things that have the ability, almost more of a problem than EMP technology and that sort of thing, that they can kill those grids and turn them off, on, off, on, off, on. What happened in Spain tells me that this was a dry run with the power outages.
Yeah.
If they can take out the energy grid that quickly, and I know that there's a lot of people working towards, and Sean's working on, he put something out there too, 0 point energy. There's other names for it too. I kind of like some of the 0 point energy stuff people get crazy about, but I know Sean is working on the good stuff. There's several people I know that are working on the good stuff. So I don't want to confuse this, but I have a feeling that we're going to see something like this, and you better be ready for it. What if, ask yourself the question, what if the energy grid goes down? Sean just said Space Force was behind the Spain incident. I'm not surprised, because it could even be the good guys that take this grid down. Because how do you stop all of the problems with the surveillance state? There's nothing we do that's not being surveilled. They can do it through LEDs. They can look right through your house. If you're afraid of somebody seeing that you're having a fat day, sorry, it's too late. They can see right through your house. Okay. There's nothing that you do that is not being surveilled at this point in time. And I'm kind of like, if you're that pathetic that you want to look at things, go ahead. I could care less. I got nothing to hide. And I know everybody here has nothing to hide. You're just making yourself look really bad globally. Right. But if they take the electric grid down, and as I've showed everybody when we've analyzed what happened in Cleveland, the Cleveland debacle that happened a few years ago, you have to get energy from somewhere to start energy somewhere. We've never come back from or experienced a dark start or black start in this country. We have 12 critical infrastructure points in the grid. If they hit 9 of them, we're done. It's going to take a while to put this back online. We do have mobile transformers that I identified and such, which is great. We do have some technology that is out there, but there's going to be an interruption. And I think that some of the things we've seen are the dry run for this. But I think it's important for us to realize you're going to have to figure out how to work with people around you, and it's going to have to be quick. And assessing what skills people have in keeping the peace, and and I'm not fear mongering. I'm a planner.
Yeah, and that's all part of the demonized militia, right? That is 100% part of that duty among the people, is to be able to gather together, to know what each other is capable of, what we have, what the assets are, what all the liabilities are, be able to eliminate those and be able to provide for our own communities. Self-sufficiency was the key to the foundation of this country, and it is the key to be able to maintain it. Once you become dependent on the government, you become a slave to that dependence, right? George Orwell said in his book 1984, everybody should read that if you haven't, it's a political language that makes lies sound truthful, right? Democrat Republican Party is the prime example of what we see. The political language that happens between the two makes people believe that they are in fact legitimate contenders to be our lawful representatives, and neither one of them are. The majority of those that come out of them are not. They do not have the authority to exist. They do not have the authority to do what they do. They do not have the authority to be their own law, depending on who is in the majority of our legislatures or Congress. The same law applies to each one of them. And it's the people's duty to uphold that and hold them accountable to it.
Well, and the problem that I have with the political parties, being the chairman of the Taxpayers Party, the Constitution Party in Michigan, we will not be taking the big donations. We're not going to do it. I would turn it down in a New York minute, because at this point in time, we have to outwork them. We can't outspend them. And the Republican Party of Michigan, there's 3 of them now because they can't get together because they've divided it in order to divide the people so that they control the narrative. The Republican and the Democrat parties are a threat, a national threat to the United States of America. They are a foreign threat because they've taken foreign money, the PACs, the PACs, the money laundering going on there, and anybody that stays with them for any reason has complicitly enabled their agenda. This is just sort of like the nurses having, well, I was just doing my job, giving the clot shots. If you're part of it, you're part of the problem at this point in time. And not only should the leaders be prosecuted for what has gone on with this, the leaders should be prosecuted for their actions in this. And I'm going to be miscongeniality for this, and I don't really care. We have to call the criminality out for what it is. And we should not have a couple hundred people determining through cult practices of vetting people like the Masons to determine who sits in the seats to rule. And I say rule because it's a monarchy at this point in time, or an oligarchy, whatever you want to say, to rule the nation. Now, I'm very thankful for President Trump and all the good guys standing with him, because I think they've kind of infiltrated and foiled a lot of their plans. I think it's fantastic. But going forward, we're going to have to come up with something radically different than the criminal usurpation that's happened and the treason that's been allowed to continue on for decades. I yield.
Yeah, I see Sean just made a good point when he said that 370 million people would donate $1 each. You could fund the Constitutional Party, right? That is the point that has been made over and over and over for decades and decades and more than 100 years, is that if the people would just give a little bit, it doesn't even require time most of the time, because there are some people who are willing to put the work in. If you're not willing to put the work in, maybe you can help out. Maybe you can help fund somebody that's fighting, right?
Yeah, get off the bread and circuses and spend like 15 minutes a day posting stuff or show, something like that gets good stuff out there, that uncovers the systemic corruption. And you don't have to point people out. Just look at the corruption. That'll out who's involved in it.
Yeah. When you look at this, one of the comparisons I like to make.
Bring Greg on and keep talking here. Hi, Greg.
Good morning.
Good morning. When you look at the missionaries that we send, right? America is well known for its missionaries, especially back in the 70s and 80s, right? Our town here, the main seat in Kent County, Michigan, is Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids was the highest, had the highest amount of missionaries they sent all over the world. Out of any other city in the United States, it was Grand Rapids. What are we known for now? Our breweries, right? That's where we went. But if you look at how much money we spend trying to evangelize the world, okay, think about it. We spend billions of dollars. We willfully give to missions across the world. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. But we willfully give that money to evangelize across the world while our own backyard is a dumpster fire. Right.
Well, look at the claim it and frame it churches that are in bed with the DeVosses and such, and those are the ones that were developing the supply lines into China. So they use this sort of thing in order to further the global crime syndicate, and they're a bunch of wolves in sheep's clothing.
Donna, you were going robotic a little bit just then.
Oh, that's because I was talking about the DeVosses and the claim it frame it churches going into China.
You still are.
Yeah,
yep. You are a robot. Prove to us you are not a robot.
Over the target. Over the target. Am I still a robot?
No, you were good on my end.
Oh.
But so the comparison there is you look worldwide at missions, and then you look at our own country, right? How many people are so willingly ready to give time and money to deal with federal issues right now, right? To deal with the big two parties. A lot of them want in so badly, You know, you hear, especially precinct delegate positions, they want in so badly over there to make a change regarding federal policies and such. You know, trying to restore the nation. But what have you done in your own township? Right? When you read the book of James, what is one of the comparisons that he makes? Right? When they're talking about judging people by their works and faith, he makes a comparison of Abram, that Abraham was justified by his works. Now, that's not justification of salvation. He's speaking to the churches as to how to justify individuals. How do you see individuals? Who do you let in? Right? Who do you trust to put forth the effort? It's the people you see doing the work. It's those people that are going to be able to make a difference at a higher level. But put forth the work in your own backyard first. Don't try to go to somebody's backyard and fix it when your own is on fire, right? Put out your own fire and then go help save somebody else as well, lest you lose everything.
We're going to have to cut the head of the snake off of these developments and developers at this point in time, because they're most of them funded with foreign money, and that's how they're buying and taking over American lands. This has really become a problem. And look into whatever township or area you're in and see who they're hiring, not just for the attorneys that they're hiring, but also we need to look into who's jumping on the zoning boards, which is unconstitutional under Norton versus Shelby County. They should be gone. And they're hiring companies like Fresh Coast in Michigan here. Look at how many townships are hiring the same planning consultants and who they're tied to and how they're on board with this. Look at what the DNR is doing. The DNR, they said that they came out and told one of our guys we're fighting that Trout Lake thing. They took the dam down because they're trying to destroy our food supplies, because they've taken over all of our mineral rights and logging rights in the state of Michigan. And so they're trying to they destroyed all of our fisheries, and now they're going after the lakes, which is wrong. So they took the logs out of the Trout Lake Dam, which we're going to be on tomorrow talking with some of the people up there on BNN. And they put out a statement. They said, oh, we're not going to take the lake level down. We're going to just take it down to replace the logs. Guess what? DNR came out yesterday and said, oh, you know what? We're not putting the logs back. We just drained a lake. We drained there's no reason for anybody to go to the campground, taking down the local economy, blocking paths up there so that we do not have access to our land, clear cutting the land, taking the water rights. Thank you so very little, Nestle, as well as guess what they're really after? They're after the oil and gas underneath it. Michigan has a tremendous amount of oil and gas underneath it. This is the precursor of them being able to do oil and gas wells up there. I'll guarantee you this from somebody that works in the industry. I'll guarantee you that they always use stuff to hide what they're really doing to what they're really after, and that's the oil and gas reserves underneath there. If they can keep us off the land and they can just destroy the land and do whatever they want with it, they've literally stolen the state. They've stolen 50% of the states out west, and they're doing the same thing here under clean energy.
Yep. Think in terms of authority. Who has authority to do what they do? And think of where they gathered that authority from. Trace it back to the people, because the ultimate authority lies in the people as the establishment of government here, right? You just brought up Fresh Coast Planning. That was a perfect point. And I know, Greg, you're about ready to talk about taxes, right? So let me blend these two together. Right?
Segue.
You're leading right into it, Bill, with authority and jurisdiction. So
Segue.
Yeah, so we pay taxes and we supposedly elect people, right? I believe a lot of times we can't elect people at local levels. Most little bitty local levels we can track and trace. But we pay taxes to these individuals. Our elected officials get paid by those taxes. What do they do with our money, right? Think of Fresh Coast Planning here. We hired that individual to do a specific job. What did they do? They take our money, steal it, and go hire somebody else to do the job that we elected them for.
Yep.
That is the system of government that we have. Everybody gets paid but you.
And this is the other thing, is that they're giving all of this land and the deference to all of these developers. And guess what? Why are our taxes being raised? Why are energy rates going up 11.1% in the state of Michigan? Thank you so very little to Jennifer Granholm and Gretchen Whitmer. Why is it that the developers come in and they can just build whatever they want? And guess what? They will tax the people for putting sewer and water, which they don't need. It's not an improvement if you've already got sewer and water, and require you to hook up to their pipes, which enable their little buddy developers to come in, make money, and walk out with the profits and leave us handling everything that they've left behind. The need for more schools, the need for more infrastructure, the need for more traffic, everything. They are part of the theft of the nation. The municipalities and the townships, they're the ones that are also a pinch point here of stealing this nation. And every one of them at this point in time needs to be removed and charged criminally for what they've done in the townships. You have enough basis to charge them for this, because they've gone right along, just like with our legislators and everyone. It's top to bottom corruption, systemic corruption. You guys cannot, the ones that are involved in it out there, you have the right to walk away from this. Just like the doctors did with COVID, you have the right to look at this and say, I'm not going to participate in these organizations any longer, and do the right thing. If everybody stopped participating, done.
Yep. That is the basis.
All right, guys. So last words here, Karen and Bill, and I'm going to go to a short break, and I will be back with Just Greg. It's going to be the name of the segment, Just Greg and me.
Excellent.
Is Karen back yet?
She's there. She jumped back on. Oh, there she is.
I'm here, but you all are not working clearly for me on my end. I think it's a hard issue, something going on. So I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll take my little section here. As Karen was talking earlier about love and hate, right? About love and hate. Paul made it very clear to the church at Rome when he talks about let love be without dissimulation, abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good, right? There's a separation. Even in love, there has to be a separation. There is a distinguishing factor through discernment, right? Not only are we supposed to be do good to those who we would call brethren, we're supposed to do good to those who despitefully use us, do good to our enemies as well, right? Now that there's a lot of material good that goes into that because we care about life, right? We care about liberty. However, love also requires rebuke. Love also requires reproof. But you cannot have those two unless you also say love also requires exhortation. You cannot have any separate, right? And so, like Donna said, those who just go around and like to point the finger and rebuke and rebuke and rebuke and rebuke, and it, fine, whatever. It needs to be done, yeah. But what are you doing to help strengthen the individual, right? I can say I have spent years upon years with individual people and spent years of rebuke and years of instructing them in hopes to exhort them to become better than where they wish to remain. And a lot of times it's met with complete folly. And at some point you have to draw the line and you have to say, well, it's very clear that you do not want to turn from where you're at. And so you have to let them go. But as long as the people are willing to hear and they are willing to make the smallest of adjustments, then keep at it. Because you never know who you might reach.
Here's a question, and to that point too, it's like love is not letting a serial rapist go to harm more people. That's not love. That's not compassion. Love is not having an open border to let people traffic and use children as pawns to enter into this nation as an army, invading army. That's not love. That's not compassion. That is the opposite of what, a lot of the people who believe they're doing the right thing. I mean, I heard Kennedy say it in person where he said, we thought we were doing the right thing by opening the border. And he said, we created the greatest humanitarian crisis that we couldn't even imagine. And you have to call things out. You have to stop it and stand in the way of innocent people being harmed. And so, and hopefully they will turn towards God and do the right thing. This was a good discussion today, I believe, and in morality and integrity and honor, and approaching everyone with, giving people the ability to have respect, because none of us know everything. We come together as one body, working together to help each other. And if we work it that way, that's what God intended for us. We can live in peace in this land. So thanks, Bill. I'm going to go to a real quick break here and fill up my water glass, and I will be right back in about 1 minute with Greg. It's going to be just Greg and me. So thank you. And thanks, Bill.
Have a great day, Bill.
You too, Greg.
Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the 28th day of May 2025. I'm going to get right at this. It's Greg and me.
Good morning.
So I think that was a great conversation that needed to be said. Sometimes we just need to have those conversations.
Yes, we do. And it was a perfect segue into how we can begin to start some of that love and remedy and help the people. But we have to go back and review our history in order to be able to get there. So
I agree. We have to have analysis on what's happened so we don't repeat it again. That's the value of history, is that you look at the mistakes that were made and say, yeah, that didn't work out so good, so we're not going to repeat that this time. We're going to figure out a better way to do things. And one of the things is being able to focus on human beings and human problems over profit and over the material world. So for anybody new that's joining us here, that's what we were talking about, is getting off the worship of the material world, and doing life the way God wants us to do it.
And that happens with fellowship and local, not national, not from the top down. It happens from the bottom up.
So where do you want to go today? I mean, we decided about talking about a lot of different things, taxes, the history of jurisdiction, and that sort of thing. So let's move right into that. And I'm ready. I'm always ready to be educated. I love listening to people with divergent ideas. And I know there's a lot of people who've worked pro se in many different areas. We talked about that this morning a little bit. There's always something to learn from each other. And I think this is very important, to consider everything, even if it doesn't fit within our own biases. And everybody has them. Everybody has biases. But just to listen and say, well, I think I'll take time to ponder this a little bit. So what is it that you want to talk about today?
And I think that's extremely important, because I have seen and experienced both sides, and there's room and place for all sorts of different things. But ultimately, unless we go back to the beginning and look at our text, history, and tradition, and we learn it and we teach it and we're able to repeat it, we're just going to be guided by our politicians, rather than, in a republic, the people have to be not only the beneficiaries of the republic, but we have to be the protectors of the republic. And that's where we've, gone astray, because our politicians have diverted our attention away from managing the republic versus the democracy. And so again, I want to go back and look at that history and look at what a republic is in our constitutional republic. And I thought the best way to do that, I was at a conference this weekend, and Jaron Jackson puts up these awesome graphs, and I thought we could pull that up and we can look at exactly what our constitutional republic looks like, and that will lead us into, okay, how are we where we are, and what does that mean? So
did you email that to me, or do you have it on your computer?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, there we go. Got it.
You should have two documents. One is the explained sketch. The second is the Mohr case, which we'll pull up later. But I want to start with the explained sketch, because I think it does a good job of relating, how our founding fathers and the Federalists and Anti-Federalists got together and created our constitutions. So, and what that actually means. And Jaron's done a great job of just, diagramming it. So rather than me recreate that wheel, I don't mind learning and using other people's resources to help educate us.
Which one would you like me to pull up first?
Just the explained sketch, which is the we the people due process of law in the middle of it with a big old bold line.
Got it.
If you see that, it's a graph. It's just a single page.
I'm working on my skill set here.
All right, I got it. There you go. You got it.
How'd I do?
Excellent. Okay. Excellent.
See if I can increase the size just a little bit.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to fly through this, because I think we have a lot of ground to cover to get to the Mohr case, which was decided last year, and have people understand it. The founding fathers created this constitutional republic, and that is where we, the people, are the kings and queens without subjects. So that just means we don't have our own, courts below us, but we are the kings and queens. And God gave us all of our rights, and those rights in a constitutional republic have a clear, bold line between how our government is formed and what they actually have access to control. And not for today's show, but those reserved rights, which are on the left-hand side. So if you blow up kind of the left-hand side of this a little bit, if you're able to do that.
Give it my best shot here.
All right. And go down a little. Those reserved rights are withheld, not only withheld from the Constitution. Lawmakers can never make a law that would infringe on any of those reserved rights. They are literally not even in the Constitution. They are given, they're excluded from their ability to control life, liberty, property, speech, arms, etc. And they go on. And those rights are granted to us, not in our federal constitution, but in the state constitutions. That's why it's important for us to understand there are 50 plus one constitutions. Now, that's we the people. Go over to the right-hand side, and how are we going to manage our federal government? Well, we're going to do it through the Constitution, and we're going to create these three separate branches of government. Government is limited by those powers that were granted to it by the 13 states when the Constitution was formed. And we have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And those three are completely independent and cannot infringe on each other's jurisdiction. So, and this is where the word jurisdiction will continue to come up in our conversation, because understanding our jurisdiction and where we stand and what they did in order to, pervert justice in America is extremely important. So again, this graph is something that everyone in the audience should go back, continue to look at and fully understand. That big bold line can only be infringed through fundamental common law and due process of law. And again, we're not going to go into those in detail today, but not the due process of law that they currently have put us into. That's due process of law where they're using equity, courts of equity, and not courts of record. If you are going to infringe the rights of the American people, we the people, we are kings and queens. And if you're going to infringe our rights, the only way you can do it is through a court of record. Well, that's sort of been lost over the last 150 years, and it's been lost especially when it comes to the federal tax system. And I think if you can begin to understand it as it relates to the federal tax system, you'll clearly be able to understand it as it relates to all of the other rights that are listed on the left-hand side of this page.
Let me ask you a question here, because I just have some questions. Just so I understand this. It's my understanding that the rights are given by God, correct?
That is correct.
And that the Constitution guarantees that those are not to be infringed upon, period, correct?
The Republican Constitution,
The
correct.
Republic.
The
Yes,
Republic.
in the Republic. But what's happened is they've actually usurped that. Am I understanding you correctly? Is that they've usurped that and put basically pretended jurisdiction in place?
And we're going to go through this in detail and what happened when, and I'm going to prove, because we prove all things in writing. So I'm going to prove to you, and I'm going to show you and discuss the specific things that happened where they usurped it and they tricked us into going from the left-hand column over there where we the people and the rights are reserved. And they actually made us trustees inside the trust, because once they made us trustees inside the trust, then they could charge you income taxes. They could charge you property taxes. They could effectively take control of you and make you a subject to the elected trustees. Now, that's a lot to handle. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, because I'm going to try to do it in a format that helped me get to where I am today, because this is not the easiest thing to understand. And I'm going to try to put it in terms that make it very easy to understand and what happened when. And clearly our founding fathers were concerned that if we don't go back to text, history, and tradition and go back to fundamental principles and do it line by line, then our elected officials are going to find ways to rape and pillage all of our wealth. And owning property is a key to a king. It is a key to a republic, and we are not a democracy. They are a democracy. They're living in a democracy, but how did they get there? So let's go back and figure out how they got there. And I think I can do that by giving you the history of the United States very quickly and just identifying certain things that happened after the Constitution was signed, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution was signed.
Well, and I think this is it's really valuable in order to, understand why we're doing this, why we look at these things, not to be fear mongering or anything like that. It's that we need to have this knowledge, and going through it step by step really gives us a chance to process the information, connect the dots, and be well informed and educated, about it, which is wonderful. Where do we start?
So what we just showed you is a constitutional republic. That is where the people are in charge, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Due process of law, using the fundamental common law, that is the law of the land. Supreme Court has validated it. How did we get so far away from it where now the Supreme Court over the last 2 years, over what Trump has done, has by appointing those 3 people to the Supreme Court, and by actually we the people sending them notices in order to get us back to that republic, because we understand what they did now. So everybody talks about the District of Columbia and it's a rogue, government. Well, it wasn't for 125 years. The Residence Act of 1790 created the District of Columbia, and they did it constitutionally in the Republic. So people's mindset of, this democracy that they created was legally created under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution. And we granted the federal government the ability to create the District of Columbia, but it was limited to 100 square miles. So they did that in 1790 under the Residence Act of 1790. So they created it. George Washington signed off on it, and that became, which was land donated by Maryland and Virginia, that became the District of Columbia. Now, we still only at that point had one constitution, and that was the Constitution of the Republic. So at that point, our government was still not rogue, and it was still run for and by the people, and people knew what was going on back then. Then they created in 1792 the Universal Commercial Code. Again, I don't want to go into the UCC today. That's something we can do in the future, but that was created under the Coinage Act of 1792. It has some significant features of what they did later on. Now, everybody talks about the Organic Act of 1871, and I talk about it as well because it's a significant act. But most people don't realize the Organic Act actually was signed in 1801. And what it did was create for the first time the municipality, the government that was in Washington, D.C. in those 100 miles, 10 miles square. So that, and they had exclusive jurisdiction over that territory. So in 1801, that was the very first Organic Act, and it was signed by our Congress, and it created effectively a sovereign entity within the United States, a completely separate, independent, sovereign entity. And they did this under the auspices of, this is the way to not have any individual state have influence over our federal government, even though our government is flipped, where we, the people, are in control. The states are senior to the federal government, and the federal government had very limited powers in the beginning, very limited powers. So what happened and how did they get to where we are today? So we take that Organic Act of 1801, and I'm going to jump significantly ahead now, and I'm going to mention the Homestead Act, which was passed in 1862, and that kind of created a different form of land patents. Up until that point, what we had, what was called allodial titles. We had titles to our property where we actually owned everything below and above. Again, the Homestead Act is something we can talk about in our future broadcast, but it's important to understand when that happened, because that combined with the Universal Commercial Code, they created and knew where they were heading. And in 1871, when they passed the modification, if you will, to the Organic Act of 1871, that's when things began to change dramatically, and they knew where they were heading, and their goal was to be able to charge a federal income tax to everybody in the country. So unless you understand that history and you go back, you have to understand that words mean a lot. And the word citizen, the word resident, the word person, they've been usurped, they've been changed, the definitions have been changed, and a lot of that started on steroids in 1871 after the Organic Act of 1871. Again, that's a whole nother, lesson, if you will, and we can talk about the Organic Act for, a whole day if we want to.
Well, in our time, look what they've done to just the terms that we use right now. What is a woman? What kind of an idiotic question is that? I'm sorry.
It is so ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous.
And now I hear them talking about what is a man. Now they're trying to understand what is a man, and they want us to create and focus on everything but truth.
It's satanic because it's confusion.
And
when you look at it, Satan is the author of confusion. So anything that creates confusion, you can trace it right back to the battle between good and evil. I don't know about you, but I'm not confused what a woman is or a man. Anybody that grows up on a farm, dog's not confused, chicken's not confused, horse is not confused, bees sure aren't confused,
And the most important is God's not confused. God gave us two genders, period.
Yeah, there you go.
So what happened next? After 1871, the federal government felt empowered, and they wanted to they now created a sovereign entity, a separate from the United States, separate from the 50 states of the Union that were living under the constitutional republic. So what did they do? Well, in 1894, President McKinley wanted to charge an income tax. Well, the Constitution clearly only allowed them to charge two types of tax: a direct tax, and that was only for war, and it was limited, and it was only charged per head, per capita. So every state, if a state had 3% of the population, it was going to pay 3% of the tax that was collected, and had to be done by census. Well, and that's basically what's called apportionment. So that apportionment in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, is a direct tax and can only be charged after the census is complete, it's allocated to the states, and then the federal government has the right to collect it. Well, how in the world did we get to a federal income tax that we have today? Well, in 1894, after the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act of 1894 was passed, in 1895, a case went to the Supreme Court. That case was called Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust. In that case, President McKinley, who passed the Wilson and signed the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act, it was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And it was deemed unconstitutional because there was no apportionment among the states, and it was considered a direct tax. The second type of tax that the federal government has broad authority to tax is an indirect tax. That's on, and I use the acronym DIE, D-I-E, because it's on duties, impost, and excise. And that indirect tax is what's called a privilege, not a right. So if you go back to the original graph that we had, you can only infringe on our rights for taxes if and when we're in the middle of a war, you do a census, and I don't care whether you make $1 million or you make $20,000, every single person in America is going to pay the same, because our freedom is worth the same to everyone, regardless of how much money you make. And that's what a direct tax is considered. Well, after the Pollock decision, taxes went away for a period of time. So what happens next? And I'm going to mention the Hale versus Henkel case, because that case has been upheld 1,600 times, and that case validates the rights of the people. So that was another significant case. I don't want to go into the details right now because we've got a lot of ground to cover to get to where in the world did these federal income tax come from. So it goes back to a place not far from where I live called Jekyll Island, and Edward Mandell House. What did he do? Well, they met with Woodrow Wilson and many other very wealthy, significant, investors that could get Woodrow Wilson elected to the White House. And they got him to agree that if they got him into office, then he would pass the Federal Reserve Act. And ultimately, that's what happened. Again, the Federal Reserve Act created this new Federal Reserve Board and the IRS Code and several other things. But again, that's a whole nother discussion. I just mention it because I'm trying to walk you through this timeline. Then
it's not even part of our government. Actually, it's independent. People think it's part of the government, and it's an independent entity.
Well, it is an independent entity, but it is an independent legal entity. It may not be constitutional in the Republic, but it's legal. So what the Organic Act of 1871 did, after it recreated Washington, D.C. as it was already its own sovereign, it was already its own municipality. And what they did was create effectively a de jure government over the top of the Republic. And that's what we operate in today. It's a democracy. And that democracy has no control over the people, except for the fact that they put everyone into the democracy as a trustee. So when you think about that, and they made us all trustees. Well, how did they make us trustees? Well, they made us trustees through making us register and license every single thing we do, including getting married. Getting married up until that point was done with your local church and your family Bible at home. Having children were registered in your local Bible at home. Well, what they did was create these licenses. Number one, to get married. Number two, you committed to your state that you were going to register your children. So you register your children through your birth certificate. Then you register them again with your Social Security card. And that's all in the democracy, not the Republic. So we have these two parallel moving governments that are side by side. And in the Pollock case, so let me take one step back because I need to mention Howard Taft and how he's involved in this. So Howard Taft realized after the Pollock decision that we had to find a different way, or the government had to find a different way to charge taxes directly to the people. So what does he do? He passes what it becomes the 16th Amendment, which is, many people call it the Income Tax Amendment of 1913. So, and this amendment is so key. It basically gave Congress the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumerations. Now, this is why I went back and tried to help you think about the sovereign entity of DC that was created, because you have to understand the 16th Amendment. That amendment was the very first amendment and the very first act that had ever been passed by Congress that only related to the democracy and not the Republic. When you begin to understand that and understand that the democracy is the only place. And how do we know that? Well, there was a case in 1916, right after that happened, in the Supreme Court. That case was called Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad. That case clearly laid out that this was constitutional. And why was it constitutional? Two reasons. Number one, it was only on the 100 miles of Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. It was only that jurisdiction. And if for any reason they put us into that area, they had to include in the IRS Tax Code, which is there today, and it's been there since the very beginning, since 1913, they had to include what's called a revocation of election. And why did they have to include it? Because we, the people, the minute we realize who and what we are and what grounds, what our status is, what our standing is, what our jurisdiction is, it goes back to jurisdiction. Once you understand your jurisdiction, you can opt in out of it. And by the way, they made it a one-time election per what we call American nationals that are outside the District of Columbia. Because what they did with everything, your birth certificate, your Social Security card, all the licenses that they granted us, they've done it through corporations all the way down through the states, literally in every single state. They created corporations which we license with, we contract with, including your driver's license, including, your license to cut hair. This is what Judge Gorsuch is speaking about in his book called Overruled. That's an important book for everybody to read, because once you read it and you listen to the subtleties and you overlay what I'm telling you on top of his book, you begin to understand why he's telling you we, the people, have to control our republic. If we want our rights back and want to get rid of our privileges, that they swapped our rights for privileges, you have to understand that jurisdiction. You have to understand, do you want to be one of the people, or do you want to be a trustee in their de jure government? Because right now, you've got the constitutional right. And if we can go back to the sketch for 1 minute, I just want people to see what's at the very bottom of it. At the very bottom of that, it says public versus private. People have to understand, we, the people, since we are the kings and queens and the creator of our government, and therefore we control our government, and we are the sole beneficiary of our Constitution and our government, they are our servants. And we have to understand the difference between public versus private. We get to operate in the public or in the private all the time. And we can pick and choose when we go into the public. And unfortunately, since the government realized in the Constitution, and I'm speaking of the constitutional republic now, they had the right to control commerce. Well, really, really smart attorneys from Harvard and Yale and all these other major institutions figured out how to put us in the public permanently. And everything you do, including living in your house at home, is considered in the public because we've agreed to it. We've consented to it. We've contracted into it. The good news is we don't have to stay there. You can literally take your rights back anytime you choose and go back into the public or the private. So, but you have to understand what those two mean. So the Brushaber case, which was brought right
John talks about that too in the cases that you brought up, because I think that's important to go back and evaluate the stare decisis law and the things that are still there.
Absolutely.
It's
critical. Extremely important. And they make it really clear in the Brushaber case what an indirect and what a direct tax is. What is the difference? And what the 16th Amendment, they claimed in that Brushaber case, gave the federal government, when I'm talking the federal government, I'm talking about DC, gave them no new powers. It did not give them any powers to place a direct tax on we the people that is not done by apportionment. Now, how do we know all this? Well, many people have known this, and then they've been, categorized. They've named us sovereign citizens. They put us into a class. And why did they do that? Because they couldn't have the truth come out. Clearly, this is well before the internet. So many people weren't able to assemble like we can today and discuss these issues and begin to understand and analyze what's happened what cases have been decided and how the Supreme Court plays this line.
Isn't
'Cause
it
they are
amazing how
clearly-
the internet is just such an equalizer?
It is such
It
an
is-
equalizer.
It's amazing. You know, when we look at the resources we have at our fingertips that we didn't have, 20 years ago, or even, 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago, and the rate of change is just incredible that everybody has access to.
It's God. It's no question. It's God. It's God guiding us and giving us the tools and giving us Donald Trump the first term, giving him the 4 years off. I believe God has
I don't
done.
think he was taking the time off. Just saying.
Well, I think that allowed him to go back, and it allowed the Supreme Court to operate. Because if the Supreme Court hadn't decided many of the cases that they decided in that 4 years, Donald Trump would have had a much more difficult time in his second term, I believe. So again, this is clearly debatable, but I will tell you, when they overturned Chevron, the case of SEC versus Jakarski, I mean, you can go back in history, the Mohr case that we're going to talk about here in a second, because I'm going to validate everything I just showed you and told you, and why the direct income tax does not apply to you as a we the people sui juris in the constitutional republic. It only applies to people that voluntarily give up their rights and become what's called a non-resident alien. That's out of 330 million Americans. When you look at the IRS Tax Code, section 26.7701, in that code, and I say it publicly so people can go back and listen to this broadcast and look at that code, it identifies 7 categories. In those 7 categories, the first one is U.S. citizens. And if I call the IRS right now and ask them, I live in Georgia, tell me what category I'm in, they will tell me I'm a U.S. citizen. Well, that's a lie. I am not considered a U.S. citizen because of the Chevron doctrine. And the Chevron doctrine was actually endorsed by the Supreme Court in 1984. But that it started well before. I mean, doctrines are kind of created. And, I'll just give you a little bit of an aside. In 1868, when Harvard's, university decided that they were no longer going to teach real law in America, they were only going to teach case law and procedural law. And they took out the fundamental common law and they took out the maxims of law, which are fundamental and still the law of the land. How can lawyers go to school and literally not learn the law of the land? It's because all they operate in and all they're allowed and licensed to operate in is the democracy.
The bar itself is just a membership.
It's a membership.
It's a membership.
PMA.
There is no such thing as a license to practice law.
There is no such thing.
There's no such thing. And I think that that's part of their the programming that they've done to people to say, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. We have the experts. Don't question this. You didn't see anything. Go back to your bread and circuses.
It's so crazy because even once they did it, then they started to change the definitions through the Chevron doctrine, because they created these agencies and the agencies were allowed to have the same words, i.e. United States, i.e. citizens, i.e. residents, i.e. person. These are common words to Americans. And these are words that people don't realize what those definitions mean. And once we went off the gold standard in America in 1933, and then in 1935, they passed the Social Security Act. That Social Security Act effectively made everyone in America guarantors on all the debt that they borrow through the Federal Reserve Bank. We are all jointly and severally obligated to pay that debt, which is why they had to create the UCC code in order to take all the assets and make them joint owners with us.
Well, and I think this is a good point, because these people that are ruling us, because they're really, it's really a de facto situation. It's like it just sort of works. They kind of moved in and took things over, but they're taking our property, our rights, and our rights are our property, because they don't create anything. They just steal. They're parasites. I'm going to go to a couple of comments here. DC needs to be shrunk. This is from Don. DC needs to be shrunk down further, just to federal property, residential and business property sent back to Maryland. And Sean says the internet has negative and positive values. I've been able to make music. The constitutional law needs to be the forefront education of all of our children. Is there a booklet that you can share with the audience that teaches constitutional law? There's lots of them out there.
There's lots of them, and Summer Cook has created them for the novice, for the people that haven't learned. So if you want, you can go see her books. But the problem is, they really, even these books, in order for us to understand the tax system and the tyranny that they put us in, you have to understand the two jurisdictions, the two governments that are overlaid on top of each other, how they interact with each other, and how we the people can operate solely in the private through the constitutional republic. And hopefully that makes sense too.
It takes time. And I think this is the other thing too, because, you know, everybody is at a different stage of knowledge and learning these things. There may be some people out there that have never heard any of this and realize that this takes such a amount of time and dedication to learn. You don't learn this kind of stuff overnight. It's a process. What you can do, the best thing you can do is just take a few baby steps and say, well, I want to look into this a little bit more, and take responsibility into just saying, well, I'm going to look up this topic and see what I can find out about it, one step at a time, so that you're not overwhelmed with the fact that things have been off the rails. This is, you know, we've talked about this before, you know, like I was diagnosed with cancer years ago, and it never bothered me. I never like skipped a beat, because when you get diagnosed with a problem, or you have a problem, it didn't start when they tell you,
right,
when they deliver the news, just so you know. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, once you get diagnosed with a problem, it's like, this thing has been going on for decades. Okay. It's not like it just popped up the moment that they deliver the news to you. So there's no reason to be upset about it and be panicked about it or be afraid of it. This has been going on a long time. We're talking more than 100. We're talking way more than 100 years. You go back to the Articles of Confederation, and the fact that I don't think Canada was never properly federated. And the sad thing is I don't think the United States was either. If you go back far enough, there were people that were pulling the levers and adjusting things for self-interest. This is human nature.
Human nature. Power breeds evil.
This is the result of a fallen world, is you have people that are out for self-enrichment. We just have to be able to say, yeah, I'm not doing what that guy's doing right there, because that's a bad plan. Not pointing at Greg. I think I'm pointing the other direction. I'm not doing what that guy's doing over here. I'm going to get this figured out and try to do the right thing. And that takes it's a process. It's time, and it's a process. And whether we're committed to learning the truth, not just what feels good or you know, feeds into our biases. There's a couple terms that you use that I know some of my audience will probably sit here, and if I don't bring it up, they're going to say, Donna, why didn't you say it's de facto? It's like the de facto and the de jure thing. Some people think the de jure government is the correct government. Some people will say we're in a de facto right now, which works, but it's unlawful. The terminology is there. Don't get caught up in the weeds in this.
Well, and go back to the original Constitution. I mean, that was signed in 1789.
I'm coaching everybody out there that's gonna say, you didn't bring up de facto, right? To me, to say that, it's like, don't get caught up in the weeds in this. We're talking through issues, and it's okay to listen to people with things that we're not familiar with, and not defend our position. So that wasn't meant for you. That was meant for some of the people that I know listen to my show every day and will take issue with me on that. But it's like I'm not going to take issue with the terminology. I'm here to learn and listen and increase knowledge and not necessarily hang on to biases just because they're familiar.
Well, and I was one early on in my discovery and understanding of taxes and the system and the 16th Amendment. And I argued with many accountants and attorneys on, what and why and how this fits in. Well, I've never had someone explain to me the way I just explained to you and go through history in order to be able to understand, because our founding fathers did give the power of the legislature to create the 10 square miles. I always thought that was just created at rogue and they created that government. Well, no, that government was created in 1801. So go back to 1801. I mean, our founding fathers knew that the federal government had to have some territory where they could be independent of state control. Because if not, you'd be inside of a state. And therefore, that state would have undue influence over your federal government.
Well, and look at how much land they've taken within our states for federal buildings.
Why did they do that? Why did they do that? They did that on purpose now. Because again, you give our government power and you don't manage that power, which is why we do notices and affidavits. Now you're beginning to understand this is why we do what we do. Because our government officials don't even understand what I just told you. 99% of them. They don't even know
their jobs, and the people
they don't know their jobs. They've never read the state constitutions. Yep. They read the federal constitution if we're lucky, and then they don't understand where their powers and rights or privileges, because they have privileges. They are our servants, but they put us into the trust. So they think, and this is what they teach them. When you go to Washington and you get elected, they're going to teach you that they are in control, and they are. And by the way, all the Article I courts in America, which Judge Gorsuch says, every one of those Article I courts, they're not constitutional Article III courts. They can't prosecute you as someone in the constitutional republic, because it's not due process of law. They don't operate by due process of law based upon the definition when the Constitution was signed.
They're a money collector. That's what
they're a money collector.
That's all it is.
But somebody has to explain why they're a money collector and how did they get to that point.
They turn into civil action jurisdiction. And that's why they 98% of the cases are money judgments, and they take 18% of that goes into the retirement fund and benefits back on the people that are making the decisions.
And again, I want to be careful with wordings, because and that's what was told to me forever, is they lack jurisdiction. Well, they don't lack jurisdiction. They have Article I jurisdiction to create. The legislature had the right to create those courts of equity for transactions in commerce. I mean, that's not we the people. That's not our rights. They had the right to create them. They just extended them to literally everyone in America.
Yes, and that's the refusing to stay on the rails here for job descriptions. In office is where the problem is. The attorney general was just there for commerce, and now our attorney general in the state of Michigan is completely rogue. They're in everything. The last lawsuit that I filed, they literally sicked five attorneys from the attorney general's office on to that case to defend someone. Instead of seeing that it was investigated, they went and they just came in to defend. That was it.
They don't have to investigate it. I mean, it's just like when Dan
they don't have to defend him either. I mean,
you're right. But remember, they're operating in that corporate entity that has all been created, and it's been created legally, maybe not constitutionally in the republic, but it's been created legally. Now, the problem that they have is this, and that is they take an oath to uphold my Constitution. And this is where the conflict comes in for them.
And the
And that
resolution.
conflict is powerful. And now we have a Supreme Court that said that conflict, you bring me a case to the Supreme Court that's based upon your constitutional rights and you do it properly, you win. You win every time. The problem is these lower courts and these appellate courts, they're still operating under the old Chevron system. Well, Chevron was overturned. If Chevron was overturned, how can they continue to operate on that system? Well, they are, because we're not bringing the proper cases. If we start bringing the proper cases with the proper jurisdiction into their courtrooms, and we demand that they follow the fundamental common law and the maxims of law, we're going to get different outcomes. And I believe we are so close to getting our Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court's already flipped. Now we're so close to getting control. And that's a whole nother segment for us. And I know we're probably limited on
I've
time.
got a little more time today. I don't have anything that follows up. There's a few things that I've got to do today. Number one, I've got to feed my bees.
Well, that helps. That helps.
That's the first thing this is the first thing on the plan for the day today is I've got to feed bees today and make sure that
awesome.
We've got a sustainable, tradable thing happening here.
That's awesome. Well, I don't know if we have time to go through the Mohr case today. We can do that today or in the next session.
I've got time for that today. I don't know how much time that you wanna spend on this. Let me see. Which one was it?
It's I think it's the only other attachment that was in that email I
got
sent.
It saved off of. I'm trying to figure out what the
it's a Microsoft
Mohr versus SCOTUS.
Yep.
Got it.
Well, it's really technically Mohr versus USA, but I'd probably put SCOTUS in the description.
I'm just reading the title here.
Yep.
So yeah, just reading the title. I have some skills, but
I should have put a comma after US. Mohr versus US, comma, SCOTUS decision.
It's a process. This is the great thing here on Brandenburg News Network. Real news for real people by real people at the kitchen table, sort of, All right. So here we go. And
I'd go back up to the top. Are you at the top? Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So this decision was argued in 2023. It was decided in June of last year. So it's a very recent decision. And I have highlighted quite a few things that we don't have to go through each and every, but this was based upon direct and indirect taxes, subpart F of the IRS Tax Code, which was passed in 2017. Again, that's not what's truly important. What's really important is, let's go first to, it's circled in red. Article 1 of the Constitution.
How far down? What page is it?
It should be on I think the first page. The first page, and it's circled in red. Article 1. There it is. Article 1 of the Constitution affords Congress broad powers to lay and collect taxes. That power includes direct taxes, those imposed on persons or property, and indirect taxes, those imposed on activities or transactions. Direct taxes must be apportioned among the states according to each state's population, while indirect taxes are permitted without apportionment, but must be uniform throughout the United States. Again, that's a whole nother discussion. Taxes on income are indirect taxes, and the 16th Amendment confirms that taxes on income need not be apportioned. Remember, I said earlier, the 16th Amendment was the very first amendment that was only signed with jurisdiction of the de jure government, the democracy, the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. So let's go on further in the decision. I mean, I'd love to someday go through this in grave detail.
Well, maybe what we should do is tackle this next week in detail and give it the time that it deserves. Because I think that sometimes smaller chunks of information are easier for people to assimilate and to understand. When it's a lot of information, it gives them time to kind of process things a little bit. If you want to do that, we could say, okay, we're gonna revisit this next week. Would you like to do that? And then we can give it the time that I know you want to take on this.
Yeah, because this literally can be an hour show in and of itself, because once you read, and I will just cite one piece of this, you don't even have to pull it back up, but it's cited in this case that Congress has rarely enacted a direct tax because the Constitution requires that it be apportioned among the states. And when they say rarely, it's debatable whether they ever did it one time. And people make the claim that they did it during the Civil War. But they skipped a step. So that's why the Supreme Court, judges basically said rarely. And then they go on in this case to actually tell you for the first time, because remember back in 1916, they never were willing to say, because they didn't want to bring down the government's power, and the revocation of election was in there. So you had the right to opt out anytime you choose. But they tell you that this is an indirect tax, excise tax. And that means all income based upon the fruits of your labor is an indirect excise tax. Indirect excise taxes are privileges. They're not, they have no constitutional right to mandate them. And therefore, I have to choose that act, whatever that act is that they want me to pay a tax on. And it cannot be me working and using my labor to work. The way they did it was they made us subjects, they made us vessels, and they put us into the trust. And that way they converted it from a direct tax to an indirect tax. Well, I like to be living and breathing and walking around. And once you begin to understand your rights and the constitutions, then you can begin to take your rights back and manage your life accordingly.
Well, and I think this is a great call once again, that if people are participating in these systems, they need to just stop. They need to, it's like I said with the nurses or whoever was giving the vaccine and didn't want to lose their income or something. Sometimes you just got to opt out of the Republican Party.
Well, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble, first of all. So remember, every year you have filed a 1040, you have filed a W-4, you have told the federal government that I'm effectively a resident of the 10 square miles. That's what you've told them. And I can go into that in detail.
I think that's a great direction to go into next time. And I really think that this is worthy of our time to absolutely understand this. And I mean, understand this as if our future depends on it.
Our future depends on it, because once you cut off their money supply,
they're done.
Once you cut off their source to owning you, then you've taken your rights back. And the Republic never left us and never will. So unless China invades America and takes us over, that Republic goes into perpetuity. So forever and ever and ever. And it's just as if you and I signed that contract, which is what a lot of attorneys will tell you is not true, but it is true. I mean, our founding fathers made it an express trust for a reason. And it's no different than I was sitting there in 1789 and signed it myself.
And I think, like I said, I think this is something that we need to really understand. So I'd like to give some more time to this case and really go through it so we do understand it and help everybody be educated and educate each other as we go. I think it's phenomenal. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today? We can go to prayers, and then, got to end with the prayer here. Got to invite God in, and we got to into our day.
No question. We need to, it's all about definitions. It's all about understanding Chevron, what it was that was overturned, thrown out. So now all those administrative agencies are going to have a tough time making those definitions stick in a court of law.
I think where we are right now in the United States of America, which is really interesting, is I had a discussion with somebody yesterday who was really involved, very, very involved in the development of AI as well as the changes. And the prevailing idea is that our country is truly set up for just incredible change as we go forward. And I think this is all part of it, is learning how we were really enslaved by people that had some really evil plans for human beings and humanity in general. So it's a great time to be alive, and I don't think we should worry about things or be or worry about jumping into this stuff and learning what's happened and then where we might go. We could end up going through this when President Trump gets done with what he's doing, and like it's been said, they will, it's as if they never existed. That tells me that probably going back to where we started is where the country is going, which is going back to the fundamentals of the United States, what the forefathers intended, which goes right back to the Bible. Everything we ever needed was in the Bible. If you go to Kings and Judges, it tells you how to live in peace with your neighbor. It tells you how to uphold each other's rights and approach people with respect and what we're not supposed to do. And, going right back to the 10 Commandments. I mean, that's a real good start. It's sort of like what happened with the Bible and the people in a spiritual religious sense is that God gave us 10 rules. That wasn't enough. They added another 648 to it and mucked it up so bad that no matter what you did, you were in violation somehow.
You're guilty. You're guilty.
And just gave everybody the reason to fight. And if we go back to basics, fundamentals of things, I'm pretty extra sure the goal here is to live in peace with each other. That peace is the prize. It's always been the prize. It will always be the prize. I've known so many people that have had so much money and they're miserable individuals. There's no joy in their life. They're literally completely miserable all the time.
Money doesn't make happiness.
It doesn't. And it's a very poor measure of success. It doesn't count in the evaluation of success. Some of the most successful people I've ever met in my life, they live in obscurity. They don't want to be known. They just do the right thing every day. And I'm pretty sure those are the ones that God treasures most too, because they just keep working. They go to work every day. They hold the family together. They're doing the right thing. They're treating people well, and they step in the gap when things go awry. They're the ones that just kind of quietly get in, make a change, and get out. So that, without anybody having attention drawn to them. And I just got to say hats off to everybody out there, the individual heroes who go to work every day, who are fighting without anybody knowing that they're fighting or what they're doing every day. They get up every day, they go to work, they take care of their families, they raise their children, they care about their communities and their neighbors. They just keep going even when it's tough. Those are the real heroes in the world. And I'm amazed and very thankful that we're all here to witness the changes that are out there.
Can I answer one question that came up in the comments?
Yes, please.
So Sean asked, "What is Greg's thought on Convention of States?"
That's a big issue, right?
Transaction. And I will tell you, I was initially a supporter of the Convention of States because it was 3 simple items that they were promoting, and I believed it came out. It did come out of the Tea Party, which ultimately collapsed, and one of the founders then went to trying to put together a Convention of States. But then when I began to understand that not that those 3 items aren't important, they are important. And I think it would be great to get all the states, 2/3 of the states, to sign that convention so that we can actually have another Convention of States, because that in and of itself will bring people together and assemble where they can communicate about our constitutions. But I also feel like we need to educate everyone that's supporting the Convention of States, because if we don't, and they don't understand what is it a Convention of States for, because I believe the Convention of States is for the wrong de jure government and not the right one.
I'm
And
gonna expand on this because of what you said, because the John Birch Society, we had a speaker that came to our national committee meeting for the Constitution Party. And my opinion for this for a long time is we're under a de facto government right now. They're not doing the right thing. They are not serving. They're not upholding their oath of office. They are not upholding their oath to the Constitution. And so this, like everything else, has been infiltrated. And the only people that I've actually heard that are pushing the Convention of States, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm really concerned that they're all MK Ultra or something like that, because these people are crazy. Like, I've seen somebody that was pushing this that was literally jumping up and down and landing on her knees. And she'd get up again and jump up and down and land on her knees. And I'm like, this is some kind of derangement of some sort, because normal people don't act that way.
Donna, can I go back to comparing it to what you said earlier in the show before I came on? And Absolutely. That is the problem with the Convention of States, is no different than the problem with the Republicans and the Democrats.
I agree.
It's two parties, and it's all about money. And the Convention of States is really no different. Just like the Tea Party was about money. Let's raise money. Let's get people in Washington. We don't need that. What we need to do is educate ourselves. They want us in these fights. They want us.
They don't want to be educated, though, either. The people that are involved in this do not want to be educated in so many of these issues. They are literally pushing these agendas to give more power to the corporations, to give the advantage to the corporations. And I'm going to throw Axe My Tax out there again. Axe My Tax is all about, it's a great headline. And I agree, we need to get rid of property taxes. They're giving you one solution. And that's not a good solution, because what it's all about.
Why do you need to do that when literally we just went through exactly how to do it the right way?
You don't fix bad legislation by more legislation. And the problem is they leave loopholes in this. And the loophole that they've left in this is that all it is a it's shifting the taxes, and it's getting the corporations like BlackRock away from having to pay taxes of anything they own. They're going to be picking up more properties like owls eating bats out at night.
I'm gonna prove to you by definition in attorneys' law books from the 1850s to the early 1900s, statutes and codes do not apply to anyone but trustees. They apply to trustees. So unless you stay in the trust and you are a trustee, go back and take your rights. Statutes and codes do not apply to you, period. End of story. No law, not one, not a few, not a little. No law can be made to infringe on my rights without due process of law.
And they use headlines. They use the headlines to
they use the headlines to suck you in, but it's again all sucking you in for money. It's creating that conflict in their world. Ignore it.
And creating a victim class, because of course everybody out there is like, well, I own property, I don't want to pay property taxes. Like, well, ho, you have just become a victim in a victim class. I own a lot of property. I own a lot. I have the most of anybody I know personally to gain in getting out from underneath property taxes, but I will not do it improperly or in a way that's going to hurt this nation. And so, and me being someone who would gain off of having this put in place, there's no way I'm going to endorse this.
Our government doesn't need the amount of tax money that it collects.
Absolutely.
It doesn't need anywhere close. It's not supposed to be in our lives, in our schools, in our churches, in these corporations. I mean, they took churches and they moved them from PMAs into 501c3s. Why? So that they can tell you what to do. They can control you. Again, it's learning the public versus private. We're allowed to be in the private all we want. The only people that are in the public are our trustees, and they better follow what we, the people, tell them to do.
And in clarification, that's our public functionaries who are elected, as well as those who are unelected. If they took a paycheck from the government, they literally have sworn an oath to the Constitution.
and
that
not
means
their fake constitution, the real one.
the real
And therefore, but let me ask you,
agreed.
why aren't we the people doing our job? Here's the trust. We are the beneficiaries, but we are also the trust protectors. We're not doing our job right now as the trust protectors.
They've snowed us under with their narratives and their brainwashing and the education system, which is nothing more than an indoctrination camp.
Well, they stole the grand juries from us too. They stole the grand juries from us, and those grand juries need to be seated by local sheriffs. We will get to that point in the next couple of years under Trump. Trust me.
I think so too. I think we're going to see some tremendous changes. And I mean, I think everybody has the right to be absolutely furious about what has happened, because this was handed to us. It was handed to our parents. This has been handed down. We can't point the finger and say to everyday Americans, it's your fault because you've done nothing. Well, guess what? It takes a while to wake up to this and go and get our arms around how big of a problem.
Took me 50 years. So hopefully it doesn't take somebody. Hopefully I can share some of the knowledge so that I can direct people where I wish I would have been directed decades ago.
Right. And it is an admonition to people that are criticizing President Trump right now, because I know there's some people that are like, well, we want to see arrests. We want to see arrests. Do we have any concept of how large of a problem this is, and how complicated it is to get to where this needs to go? We voted President Trump in. He's in there
but he's also not the problem, and he's not the long-term solution.
No, we all are the long-term solution.
He is a temporary servant. We, the people, are the long-term solution, and we, the people, need to educate and control our government.
Okay, and I'm going to do a shameless promotion here once again. So hang on a minute. Oh, and I closed the screen. Let me get this thing back up here. As the chairman of the Constitution Party in the state of Michigan, which I did this because I felt like it was important to have another option on the ballot, and we will not be taking large money, because it is any entity that takes large foreign money that's involved in our elections is absolutely a threat to this nation. And I suggest, or I would encourage people to jump off the camps, because the political parties that take these big donations, they are the problem. They're the start. One of the places where the politics in the United States has been completely hijacked. They're in on the steal. So at any rate, everybody's invited to come to this coming Saturday at May 31 at Leon's Family Dining in Taylor, Michigan. We're going to have a meeting there, and there's a lot of people responded to this that I believe are going to be there for it. And we're going to be doing a human trafficking conference too, and addressing the problems of human trafficking and how we can identify it, address it, and stop this godless practice of what's happening to our human beings, and especially the children. It's disgusting. Horrible. It's horrible. But you know what? This is how we step up and we make a difference. We show up and we learn what is gone wrong, what's also the opportunities to go right. And I honestly feel so hopeful for the future. We just have to step up and help in the process and learn the process, and being there to instruct people that don't know. And I don't mean being a smart aleck out there about it either. Like, that petulant the petulant 6 years old, like, I knew it all along. I mean, that is about as inappropriate as the people that are sitting in the seats right now. Have some class, step up and address it. You can be as assertive as you want to be, but there's a lot of grace that needs to be given to people who think that they've done the right thing. A lot of grace. And
we are God's trustees. We are God's trustees of the land, and he made us that, and he gave us our rights. So we need to act like it. We need to give him glory and do his work. And that is educating all of us on, what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. And we've got the right to assemble. And we assemble, we communicate, we talk, we discuss, and we learn what the fundamental common law is. so that we know the maxims and we can defend ourselves against our government, which is supposed to be doing, they only have one job: protect my rights. That is the only job of the government, is to protect my rights. And they've gone so rogue. I don't feel like anybody in America feels like their rights are being protected.
We've never, as long as we've been alive, we've never had the freedom that the founders envisioned.
Never.
Not. And so going
But
into
that's our fault. But that's our fault partially because we
going
didn't
into
know.
uncharted.
Our parents didn't know. It's
Going
uncharted.
into
Right?
in an uncharted land or territory, not being land, but we're going into a journey that's a little bit uncharted for all of us. It's going to take great wisdom, discernment, patience, listening to each other and hearing everybody's ideas, as well as being able to sit down with people we disagree with and listening to them with respect, whether we agree or not. I mean, the crazy crap that I've seen go on in politics defies anything that's proper and logical. When you've got people sitting there that are just fighting to be right, just and willing to do anything to win, this is such a godless thing. I can't even believe it, because and we're going to have to break ourselves of this win at, go sports team, win at all costs. And it's crazy. That's not what we stand for, but standing for each other's rights and being here to honestly, wouldn't it be a great world if we just stood for everybody's rights and actually stood up and jumped in to help each other when there was need? We don't need the government. We never did.
That's how America was built for the first 100 years. Let's go back.
Let's go back. You see somebody in need, be the solution. Step up and help them instead of calling and tattletaling to the government. They don't have their trim painted correctly. Oh no, their grass is too long. You know what? Get a mower. Maybe somebody is got a broken leg that you don't know about. Maybe there's extenuating circumstances. Instead of judging people about not fulfilling the rules, maybe we need to sit down and say, hey, do you need some help? Guess what?
Charging them a fee for statutory violations that don't even apply to them. So
it's so wrong. And I mean, it comes down to our own personal responsibility to the people around us. Let's say a prayer. I know that I'll ask you if you want to pray, and you always say, go ahead, Don, and pray. So I'm just going to cut to the chase here. Okay.
Excellent.
And dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Greg and for Ralph and for Karen and Bill and Sean and Don and all the people, Leb, that's out there today, and Charlotte and all the people that are commenting every day and taking the time and wanting to be, Denise too, and wanting to be, I could name a lot of names and I know you know all of them, so please bless them all. I'm going to blanket blessing here. That are willing to step forward and learn new things, that want to see the republic restored and your form of government that you laid out for us in your word. We're so thankful. You have never left us for 1 minute, but this has been one heck of a lesson. And I'm pretty sure you could look at all of us and say, so how's that working for you? Like a good dad would be. And you know what? We deserve it. And so it's not working well. And so at this moment in time, we all want you back. We want this to be one nation, one world under you. Whatever you say goes. It's your sandbox. Your plan works. You're good all the time. So we choose you, Father in heaven, and our wonderful Heavenly Father. We choose you. We choose your path. We're not asking for an easy path in life, because we learn by things that are difficult, probably a lot of times way more than when things go that go right. And you know what? Whatever your plan is for our life, we're in, all in, totally in, and we lay everything at your feet. Your plan has been wonderful. Thank you so much for President Trump. I ask your blessings upon him and all those who are standing with him and accomplishing what it is that you're guiding and directing to happen in this nation. We thank you so much for General Flynn and for Admiral Rogers and true heroes that have stepped forward and put their lives on the line every single day to make sure that they don't back down when challenged. I thank you for every single person who has truly decided to stand without wavering, and the strength that only comes from you in order to do that. We ask for that strength to stand under all conditions, that we would be able to be the ones working with you here on earth to make those changes. And we thank you for giving us the guidance and the direction and new things to think about. We ask that you would give us a huge degree of discernment and diplomacy working with people, and that a kind word, a wise word can change a situation completely around, from hostilities to peace. Peace is the prize, your peace, and living here in relationship with you. And we're just thankful for everything you've done for us. In the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, I pray, we pray together in honoring you in every single thing we do. We just love you so much. Amen.
Amen.
So
Amen.
there you go. So here we go, boys and girls. Going to go to that part of the show we go to every week in my 2022 protest, which is not going to end because that jaw is set. We do not waver. We do not give in to tyrants, to traitors, to cheats, to thieves and liars. And that's exactly where we're at. And it's not going to change. Not going to change until the last breath is taken on this planet. So with that said, here we go. Ding, 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 ding. Boys and girls, please go to brandenburgforgovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who's ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And I'd like to have a discussion with the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, in cowboy boots. We're going to see who wears them better. I win. I know I win because I wear them like every day, and I actually ride horses and shovel horse manure with them on. And so with that said, we elect a lot of work to do, not only to learn new things, but truly to encourage each other. You are a hero. If you are out there every day knocking it out, I'm telling you what, it is the everyday American that is the hero in this scenario.
Amen.
It's going to be us, the ones that follow God. The ones that follow God, we've always been the ones that have stepped up in dire times, because you know what? Because we got nothing to lose. We have nothing to be afraid of.
Nothing.
Nothing to be afraid of. My last day on earth is going to be woohoo celebration. I'm going to tell you what, I'm not afraid of that at all. And I know who holds the future, and he's already there. He's already made the path for us. It's going to be glorious. And some of us have had the glimpse into what that looks like, which is a phenomenal thing. There is so much more than what we can possibly understand and know. And, people that have had near-death experiences, they'll tell you what they've seen on the other side. It's pretty consistent. And thank God that he's given us those experiences that we can talk to other people about, that we can talk about, that we can listen. I mean, look at John came back and talked about what he saw on the other side. This isn't anything new. It's in the Bible. I mean, nothing's being read here. It's all there. And truly, you know what? Even for people who say that they're atheists, which I don't believe in that at all. I don't believe there's an atheist out there. It's a nice narrative, but guess what? On your last day, pretty extra sure you're going to be calling out the name of God, because when you come to a dead-end road, the only way you got to go is God, and that's going to happen, okay? So we can really look at it, and even if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, where did it come from? You got to go back to where in any of these theories, what was before that? And with that said, what was before that? Same thing has always been there. It's been God. It's been God Almighty. God. He's the one and only. He's the one. He's not bound by the rules here. And you know what? We need to jump off of the created, pretended rules that are here within our government, as well as the material world that we've been taught to worship. You are perfectly made just the way you are. And no one has the right to put you down or interfere with that. That is a right. That is a title. That is an approval by God Almighty. You are wonderfully made. He planned you. You weren't an accident. And the gifts he's given you are just unbelievable. You have an immeasurable worth, and never let anybody tell you anything other than that. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to sit down and talk. We're family, and that never changes, and that's never going to change. And I hope someday to sit down with each and every one of you, give you a big hug. I'm a hugger, okay? Give you a big hug and say, it's going to be okay. God is standing there, and he's got the plan. His plan's good, and we don't need to be afraid. So with that said, God bless you all. God bless all those whom you love and what you love. God bless America. And we're going to be back tomorrow. We're going to be chewing on the tail of the DNR here. I'm going to be nipping at their feet just a little bit because of some people. They're a little misguided right now. They're doing the wrong thing. We're going to give them a warning shot across the bow, and then pretty extra sure. And nobody go to Stupidville and say, grab your torches and pitchforks. We're going to give them a chance to right what they're doing wrong. But after that, the hammer's going to come down. They're breaking the law. They're traitors. And treason has consequences. Pretty extra sure that some of us are unwavering with that. Going to be kind of fun. And seeing things brought back to the way it's supposed to be. And hopefully they will join us instead of continuing on in their treasonous actions. See you tomorrow. We'll be back on with a friend of mine, Shane, and we're going to be talking about the DNR.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.